one of the smart things I ever did was Alan and his secretary that he had at the time, and I was working in the office part-time. I was also working for Allstate as a claims adjuster because I had the experience on the other side. So he went on vacation. He left me on the telephone for 2.5 weeks. Okay. And she left too. So I was alone. Well, believe it or not, in the 2.5 weeks, I booked and they stuck 56 jobs.
Wow.
Okay. This is gospel truth.
Yeah.
56 jobs, and I didn't put my name on any of them. I gave them all to him, to Alan, and Alan decided which ones he would give to me.
Hey everybody, Mike Jeffers, and welcome to Open Mic, the show where I talk to industry professionals about their career in music, the business of music, and sometimes many other things. That's why it's kind of like a jam session. That's why I'm calling this Open Mic. And today I am very excited to be talking with Michael Lerich. Michael Lerich encompasses everything that I just mentioned: performances, business. He's done so much with his career. Outside of the fact that he's a very accomplished musician, he's also a very accomplished music businessman, and that's what I really want to get into. But first off, right off the top of the entire show, I want to mention that he's also playing steadily around town at different jazz clubs, and he has a gig coming up May 11th. I think he's doing maybe the second Thursday of every month over at Winters or thereabouts, so keep an eye on that. But May 11th, he's doing a tribute to Cole Porter, an evening of Cole Porter at Winters Jazz Club. And let's talk about that first before we get into everything else. Michael, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking a few minutes. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Mike. Good to see you too.
All right. So before we get into the business end of your career and all of the different things you've done, which I think people are going to find very valuable, whether or not they're students just getting into the business or if they're accomplished professionals, you always pick different things up when you talk to people like you. But let's talk a little bit about this gig that you have coming up May 11th. Thursday, Winters Jazz Club. You do all this corporate event stuff, weddings and everything else, but you're still out in these clubs and killing it on a nightly basis, basically. So let's talk a little bit about this show you have coming up at Winters. What a great spot, too.
Oh, it is. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot.
Yeah.
And we're doing a tribute to Cole Porter. Two sets. And the band is terrific. Joe Sonnefeld on vibes, Chris White on piano, Corey Biggerstaff on bass, Kurt Luby on drums, and Neil Alger on guitar.
Wow, geez.
Yeah, it's a nice sextet, and I like to try to duplicate as much of that George Shearing sound with the guys, and then add clarinet on top.
Yeah, well, and that's your instrument. We should mention your instrument's clarinet. That's it.
Yeah, I used to play everything when I had to. When I had the wedding band, when I was doing that, but it was very difficult saying you're a saxophone player when Mark Colby was standing next to you for about 15 years.
Yeah, right. And Winters is such a great spot. It's wintersjazzclub.com, I should tell everybody, and they should be able to get tickets in advance. I always tell everybody Scott's great over there. And also I always like to mention at Winters, because this is kind of a new development now that's got reopened after COVID and everything. There's actually valet happening. It's not Scott's, but there is valet out there on Illinois Street. So you can park, hand your car off, walk right in, and have a great evening of live music there at Winters. If you haven't been there, I thoroughly encourage everyone to go because it's just a great little spot right in the heart of downtown. So before we get into everything else, talk a little bit about why you've done so much stuff, but you still have a passion for playing in jazz clubs too, huh? Just getting out and playing sets and playing clubs. Is it just a matter of because you love the music so much, or you like it because you can also keep your chops up and you can keep things happening on a different level than when you're doing all these private events?
Well, in truth, for so many, many years, maybe 40 or some, I had to put that aspect on the side. I used to tell people when they asked me what my instrument was, I used to say telephone. Because we were booking so much in the private party market, it became, well, truthfully, in looking back on as many records as I could, files and whatever, computer files, date books, figured that somewhere along the line from 1976 to about 2017, I had the hand in booking over 54,000 parties.
Jeez, man.
Yeah, my office was at the Drake Hotel for about 13 or 14 years. So pretty much everything that went through the Drake, if you didn't have your own, or if you were coming from out of town, came to us. I mean, there'd be 30 jobs on a New Year's.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was something that was very, very, very special. So to answer your question, I really never was able to pursue the jazz career or really the facility to be able to play. You know, like I said, I had Mark Colby next to me, and I had guys like Jim Trompeter on piano. I had the major jazz guys in my band and also working for us.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, I think a lot of people don't know, if they don't know the business, you know, when you get guys of that caliber, you know, we call them jazz guys, right? Because they play with, you know, all the top dudes and all the jazz clubs and everything else all over the country. But a way for them to make their living is to work for people like you who have these corporate events, because they can also play every single style. It doesn't mean that they have to just play jazz. They're able to play, they're like chameleons. They can play in every single different genre and make it sound authentic. I mean, that's one of those keys. That's really one of those very specific things that they don't teach you in music school that you learn, because that's why you have to learn and understand how to play all this and also have an open mind, right?
Well, the interesting thing was when I first got into the business, quote unquote, jobbing bands, wedding bands, whatever, the band leaders used to buy piano sheet music, copy it or photocopy it, put it on the music stands. They would hire old guys or older guys who used to play in the theater who could automatically create a second and third part, moving along with the melody. Okay. But it really wasn't what the young people at that time in like 75, 76 with the disco thing is really what they weren't knowing.
Right.
So when we got into it, all of a sudden came up with the brilliant idea of transcribing from the record. The only problem is I didn't know how to do that. So I had to find the guys who definitely knew how to do that. So these guys were pumping out. I still have in the locker about 70 disco charts that go all the way back from 1976. But what happened was people would hear the band and they say, hey, wait a minute, this is sounding like the recording.
Right.
That helped to boost the jobs, and especially in the era of bar mitzvahs, when kids were going to fortnightlies and learning how to dance.
Yeah.
They couldn't wait to get to the parties to show what they learned. So it was like all the slam dunk.
All right. So, you know, you brought up bar mitzvahs, and I think that let's do a little background on this, because I think there's a lot of people, even musicians, young musicians, you know, I don't know, 30, 40-year-old musicians that don't understand all of the different events and parties that used to happen and still do happen. There's only a certain number of people that actually still get those calls. But back then, I mean, as somebody like you, how did you decide? Because on your bio, it says that you specifically didn't worry about becoming a star. You wanted to create a band, be a band leader. You never worked as a sideman. You wanted to be a band leader, run your own band, and work with private events, corporate events, weddings, things like that, the private industry. Is it because you saw a niche there? Is it because you had a mentor somewhere that sparked your interest into that? Because, you know, even if you went to music school, they don't talk about that kind of stuff in music school. So how did you figure that out? And what was your passion about that?
Well, the fact is it was the business. The fact that I knew I had really good players with me, but the trick was how, getting those players to go play somewhere that would make you earn a living.
Right.
Okay, or let you earn a living per se. And so what I did was I was able to foster a business attitude, because what I realized was, which is different today, totally different today. As a matter of fact, it's one of the reasons why I retired from that end of it. People would call you as you're starting to build a reputation. Somebody heard you this place, next person would call you. And in those days, and maybe it's still the same, only it's probably more for DJs, people got bar and bat mitzvah dates 2 years in advance.
Wow.
So if you were coming on, you were getting called from people from all these different synagogues for dates, afternoon, evenings. We would do 4 in a weekend.
Wow.
Okay? And so what that did is that where you were 2 years in advance, okay? And created deposits, created cash flow, created work. Plus, you were playing more contemporary music. Okay, so you weren't really stuck in an old generation of what jobbing bands did.
Right.
And then what happened was, as the years went on, still in that bar mitzvah market, kids whose bar mitzvahs you played for remembered you. Okay, so you got a call, hey, we played my bar mitzvah, I'm getting married. Okay, and so all of a sudden now you had a wedding market that if you were hopefully lucky enough to be open because you weren't booked on a bar mitzvah from 2 years prior,
yep,
you could take the wedding. But then the DJs started to come in. And that's where I had a good business sense enough to say, get out of it.
Yeah.
No more bar mitzvahs, because bands were being canceled left and right.
Yeah, because they could just get a DJ and the DJ would play whatever they wanted.
And that's what they wanted. That's
Yeah.
what they wanted. So it didn't matter anymore. And so those bands that stayed in the bar mitzvah market when that was happening wound up getting cancellation after cancellation after cancellation. Whereas I let myself open for the weddings, for dinner dances, for the corporate work, and that just spiraled.
So talk a little bit about how. Now, I don't know, just talk about like your first gig. I mean, how did you get that connection? Because I think that's what everybody always wonders in this kind of business. Like, how did you first get the connection? But also, more importantly, how did you get the band together and understand how to run a bar mitzvah if that was one of your first engagements? Like, because you can say, okay, I did an engagement, I did a bar mitzvah. You got to put a book together. You have to put the band together. You've got to put the whole thing together. I mean, how did you go about doing that? Because that's something that you have to, it's pretty specific what you have to do in order to make it successful, right?
Well, I went to Northeastern Illinois University, so I knew a lot of it, but I didn't study music. Okay, I was a political science major. All through college, I worked for a lawyer. Okay. So working for a lawyer, because my mother wanted a lawyer, that didn't happen. What I learned was, and this stayed with me, the people who I was dealing with there, when they were negotiating cases and whatever, they really didn't want to hear what the other side had to say. Okay, they were focused on one thing, and that was getting the dollar that they wanted. Okay, right. They didn't really care about the fact that the guy might not have been as injured as they had a specific thing in mind. And what happened was, so we were playing, guys from Northeastern, and I wound up. I did two things. I got very lucky. Two ways. There used to be a restaurant called Grassfields on Ridge. It's long gone, but they opened up a lounge. And I went in there because I had a quartet, and I went in there because this was the first thing. And having had that experience of knowing how to BS a little bit from where I worked, I walked in, the guy, I still remember his name, Jim Racino, and this was 50 years ago. I went in there and he said, "What's your name?" I said, "Stan Getz." He said, "Now, how am I going to put Stan Getz on a marquee?" I said, "I don't know. It's my name." So he said, "Well, what else can we do?" I said, "All right, you can put Michael Lerich up there." And we became really good friends. We got the job on the weekends. And then I got the job that really helped me the most. I got Fridays and Saturday nights at the Officers Club at Glenview Naval Air Base. $40 a guy. Okay. Yeah. Now, the rub of the story was that was the place where I learned to be bad. Okay. We had sheet music and stuff flying all over the place. Okay. But I learned, and then I met my old partner, who I'm still close to, a fellow by the name of Alan Kay. And I met him, and we were both playing different jobs at Highland Park Country Club. And we got together, and I had a lot more free time than he did. He was really starting to roll at that time. So I would go with him on a weekend. Okay. I'd help carry his stuff in. I didn't want to play. I just wanted to watch how he timed and paced the party. That was a big thing. Timing and pacing a party. And virtually everything, Mike, was medleys. Everything was medleys. There wasn't breaks.
Keep them dancing, right? You just keep them dancing.
Absolutely. Until you're told not to.
Yeah.
Okay. And then by working with him, I met a fellow by the name of Stanley Horwich, who owned a company called Weddings Incorporated. They were a wedding consultant firm. Mm-hmm. And the first job that I had with him in 1975, before he would trust putting me on a job here in Chicago, he wound up booking a job in Columbus, Ohio, where we played opposite the Tommy Dorsey band.
Oh,
We had to take a bus out there, but he heard us, and we were good. We were good, and so he started using us. All right, and then one of the smart things I ever did was Alan and his secretary that he had at the time, and I was working in the office part-time. I was also working for Allstate as a claims adjuster because I had the experience on the other side. So he went on vacation. He left me on the telephone for 2.5 weeks. Okay. And she left too. So I was alone. Well, believe it or not, in the 2.5 weeks, I booked and they stuck 56 jobs.
wow.
Okay. This is gospel truth.
Yeah.
56 jobs, and I didn't put my name on any of them. I gave them all to him, to Alan, and Alan decided which ones he would give to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, 22, 23 years old. So I had all the time in the world, basically. I left Allstate in 76, went in there full time for the massive sum of $75 a week to work in the office, about 10 hours a day or more.
Yep.
And everything just started to roll. I know that in 1981, we did over 1,800 parties because we started getting all these other bands and band leaders working for us.
Yeah.
We brought them in.
Well, and that's what happens, right? Because all of a sudden word of mouth gets going and everybody has to have Alan Kay, right? I mean, they all just start calling.
And then Alan would say, I've got Michael because I can't be there. And then Michael would say, I've got, Joe Blow because I can't be there. And one thing led to another, but the thing was, if I can jump ahead, okay, sidemen who came into the business as leaders, who really had no business experience, basically did a lot of harm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And especially in the days of the cassettes. See, I never in my career ever sent out a cassette, a promo package, or let anybody come hear me throughout my whole career. Because I figured people are calling you based on your reputation. Okay. They heard about you. And if somebody said they heard you were good, that's why they're calling. And I felt that a demo tape didn't say what's going on and what's required to make a party happen for 4 hours.
Right.
It had nothing to do with the music and how you play it. It's what you see out there and how you keep them there with what you're going to play.
Yep.
So in the final analysis, a lot of these bands that send out demo tapes took control away from themselves and handed it to the client. They would send a demo tape, they'd put the job on hold. Okay, which I never did either.
Yeah.
All right. They put the job on hold. Now they're waiting after those people got 10 or 12 demo tapes, maybe. And now they're also, if they're putting on the demo tape, they're going to compare that demo tape of, say, Boogie Wonderland, and they're going to put on Earth, Wind, and Fire. And they're going to hear a little bit of a difference, right? So now not only did you lose control, but now you're subjected to what they think they're hearing.
Yep.
I never did that. I said, look, you want me, fine. You don't, I understand. And I remember a wonderful guy by the name of Frank Amorosi, who was a band leader in the business years ago, said to me, well, what are you going to, I said, Frank, I would worry if there's one ballroom. There's one venue. I said, but you know as well as I do, sometimes the 10th party or the 11th call could be better than the first. You don't know. You don't know. So it turned out that a lot of times I got a lot of bookings by default. They went through everybody they heard and they didn't like him, but they heard that he plays a great party. Michael plays a great party. Michael plays a great party. And after a while, and then you dealt with the stupid questions. What does your singer sound like? Okay, well, I got to the point where I said, why do you care? What do you mean? Your wedding's in 1.5 years or 2 years. How do I know this person's going to be there? The only person I can almost guarantee, unless he upstairs has another plan for me, is me.
Mm-hmm.
How do I?
That's the thing, it's so important. And, I love sales. I love business. You know that. I mean, I have a couple of different
Oh,
businesses,
yeah, yeah.
all in the music business based around it and everything. But it's so important as a musician, as somebody watching this right now, to hone your business skills from the sales standpoint, understand how to talk to people, understand how to talk to clients, and not sell yourself, but not sell yourself like gush and like beg sell. You don't want to
Oh,
beg
no,
sell.
oh, you're
You
absolutely
want
right.
to just, this is me. I'm confident in what I can do. If you don't want to do anything with, great, we can't do any business. That's fine. And that's exactly, I think, what you're talking about. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, the interesting thing was said is that when a father would call me up after the mother or the daughter talked to me, he was only interested in one thing. The father wanted to know how much money he had to spend or how much money he could save.
right.
So all of a sudden, he wasn't talking to me about the fact that, I've got the best horn section in the city, or what. Well, he didn't care about how much, how
Mm-hmm.
much,
Yep.
and then when all of a sudden the fact of the matter is, Mike, that one of the things that I said I no longer can do it anymore is when I got the first couple of emails that said, "Hi, are you open on such and such a date, and how much do you charge?"
Yeah.
Okay. And then I would write back that, well, the date is open, but I would like to talk to you to find out what you're thinking, how you figure. Would never hear back,
Yeah.
never hear back. And that's when I knew my days were numbered. If I couldn't talk, okay, if I, and I distinctly, when parents gave up the booking and handed it and let their kids handle it. I also, because they were going through all those, gestation of calling, doing rather the emails and everything else. So I just knew I was in trouble. And what happened was I got a phone call from a woman I played for before, two
Mm-hmm.
other daughters' weddings. She calls me to check the date. Okay. But she says to me, Michael, we're probably not going to use you. This daughter wants to do something different. So you know how in humor there's truth, and I always could be a little bit get this shot in.
Yeah.
I said she wants to do something different. She said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, she wants people to stay in their seats all night long." Now I
Yeah.
thought for sure the phone was going to slam down, but no. I get a phone call back an hour later. Book the job. I said,
Yeah.
well, "Really?" She said, "Well, Michael, I know you were kidding, and it was funny, but I called my husband. We know what you do. We
Mm-hmm.
know how it's going to be. So we called our daughter and said, if you want something different, you pay for it." And that was like a redeeming moment that never, ever happened again.
I love it. Just to piggyback on what you're talking about, because obviously I came up and when I started doing this, there was an email and then I had to, I'm with Chicago Jazz Magazine and selling advertising and things like that. I've learned how to write emails, but I will say this, that when they do, you get the emails in, are you open? How much do you charge? Whatever. I always say, you know what? The date's open. I have a couple of questions. I need all these details and everything. It might be easier just to touch base on the phone. So I give them a list of stuff and nobody wants to answer all those questions. So then of course, then I can I get them on the phone. And once I get them on the phone, really, I know exactly what they're looking for. And I basically just confirm with them, probably a lot.
I wasn't that smart. I was pretty smart, but I wasn't that smart, but also it was really getting time for me.
Sure.
Even on the job, it was like I'd look around, and then when bands started putting DJs with their bands
Right.
and whatever. I mean, I go back to the glory days because we played, dancing between the courses of a meal. That's
Yep.
how it was. A band. I wouldn't take a job if they wanted the band 3 hours afterwards.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't do that.
Well,
So
they still do. They do that in New York. It's like a New York style wedding where they dance in between the courses and stuff.
well, technically, it was basically in New York, but the Jewish market had been doing that the whole time.
Ah, okay.
Okay, you dance the people into the room. There was a dance between courses, and then, needless to say, you were into overtime.
Right.
If you went to midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, that could have been an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours overtime.
Yep.
So the bill just went straight up. So
And by the way, just for everybody watching, when that would happen, overtime and everything, the client is asking you to do that. So everybody's happy because the band's getting overtime, the leader's getting overtime, but the client is not mad because they're paying overtime because their guests are having such a great time, right? I mean,
well, yeah, except that the guy who really didn't want to spend that kind of money, he's sitting in the corner biting his lip. And the daughter is saying, "Hey, Dad, this is what we're doing." So it was, and then it was a whole different thing. But like, for instance, when we were asked to dance between courses of the meal. Now we're talking about 1976, 77, 78 into the 80s. So the thing is, all right, getting the people out of their chairs, right? The first thing. So as soon as they heard, and I did this for years, as soon as they heard doom, 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 and then doom, 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 the dance floor would jam.
Yeah.
They would just pack. And so you made your statements early, hey, these guys can play, know. But after a while, it got to the point where, I really didn't know what to play anymore, predicated on what was popular and how it's being played.
Right.
It got to the point where if I got lucky and had a DJ opposite, it was like, you take it.
Talk a little bit about, because I don't think a lot of people, especially the younger generation, the people that are watching this, maybe even 30-year-olds and under, even understand how there used to be like a kind of an exclusivity thing. So you had your office at the Drake, I mean, that doesn't happen anymore. But I don't think
anybody in the country had an office provided for by a hotel.
Right. I mean, there's the preferred vendors and things, but back in the day, you were running the Drake essentially. Somebody else might have been running the Four Seasons. Somebody else might have been running.
No, but nobody else had that.
Really?
Every hotel other than the Drake had a preferred vendor list, but not one particular person had any control of a hotel. There was no preferred vendor list at the Drake. There was one person. Now, the downside of this is that prior to the Drake, I'd go into the office and, like this, and, go out and play golf after whatever. I had to wear a suit. I was sitting in a suit every day working normal hours, while Alan and Jack Kramer, my other partner, they were having a good time. I was sitting there, but the amount of volume, the amount of volume and I met so many wonderful corporate people that the fellow who was head of Corning Glass, his events took us all over the country.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, he just became a friend. So all of a sudden, not only are we booking that, and then I met over the course of time the gal who became the event planner and manager for Richard Driehaus. Okay, his property in Lake Geneva.
Yeah.
Okay, and that turned into every year. The July party usually had 3 orchestras playing shows that we developed, 3 25-piece orchestras, a 15-piece orchestra playing bands, singers. It turned into an uncontrolled monolith for 10 years. All because she used to work she knew someone who worked at the Drake.
Yeah.
And that guy introduced me to her.
Yeah.
She's a marvelous event planner. Her name is Tracy Boward.
Okay. I've heard that name. I've heard that name for sure. All right, so I should mention michaellerich.com. Of course, everything's being linked up down below, and let's wrap this up by telling everybody.
Excuse me for interrupting, Mike, but the lerichjazzgroup.com.
Lerichjazzgroup.com.
Yeah, because michaellerich.com is the party business, and that's virtually non-existent. What I do is if I get calls from people who I've worked for before.
Oh yeah, referral.
Maybe or whatever. But the business has changed.
Yeah.
Especially for me. That's why I'm out.
So lerichjazzgroup.com. That's where we'll send everybody over. And of course, May 11th, Thursday, 7:30 and 9:30 p.m. at Winters Jazz Club, wintersjazzclub.com. Of course, it's 465 North McClurg Court, right? McClurg in Illinois. And as I said before, there's valet parking now. Scott's got a great thing happening. So go support him. You can buy tickets in advance. And go say hi to Michael now that you know his backstory and everything. I'm sure he's always willing to talk to everybody, and it's always a fun time hanging with him and everything.
Yeah, we just did the Highland Park High School Focus on the Arts.
Oh yeah,
and that was wonderful talking to the kids and whatever. Because like I say, my playing was put on the back burner for many, many, many years. So once I decided that I wanted out of this, I just took that clarinet and practiced 8-9 hours a day. I think
Well,
I better do it before I get too old.
Well, and the cool thing is too, is that you've got the experience. I mean, you're a great player, but then you also have all of this other experience that they just, and I can't say it enough, they just don't teach this stuff in school, man. They just don't. Yeah, I had to learn everything on my own. I had to go through this, go through that, read tons of business books, look at tons of business videos, understand stuff, subscribe to stuff. You just don't understand stuff like this. Like you don't learn it in school.
Well, let me ask you a question, okay?
Yep.
And you tell me what you think about it, because I had been asked many times over the course of my career to do a seminar, teach something in school, okay, in regard to my end of the music business, to teach the kids, okay? But what I realized is that wouldn't you say that playing weddings, when it came to musicians, was probably the last thing that they ever thought of wanting to do in their career, especially when they were still in school? I didn't want to be the person to say, hey, look where you're going to wind up and how. It really was true. But, I just felt that what I did for a living required something much more than what they're teaching and handling in practice rooms.
Yep.
Okay. It was the ability to be able to sell, upsell, come up with different ideas. And then the band was secondary.
Yep.
Okay. As you know.
Yep.
As you know, because I don't know how many people literally ask you, do you play great?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No. But it's also, and we're going to run out of time, so I'm watching the clock too, because I'll be mindful. But just to bring this up to your point, it's also so important to understand how to read a room, how to understand the layout of the night, how to understand everything. But then when you're there, you need to understand. I mean, when I'm playing on something that I've booked, and it's all corporate stuff or wedding cocktail hour, I'm not doing the big groups like you do. But either way, I'm constantly watching, seeing who's who, seeing what's what. I'm watching the father of the bride talk over here or whatever, making sure it's not too loud, making sure there's that. But then I see what's happening, and I'm like, we're going to play another tune. Just keep. It's so important that's another thing that you just can't learn. You have to be aware of what you're watching, right?
And a lot of musicians, young kids, they don't want to even have the thought of learning that. But the best question ever asked of me was my father. My father said, name me the top 3 bands you ever thought, big bands. I said, Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, and Count Basie. He said, great. Why was Lawrence Welk on television for 30 years? I said, A, he was a good businessman, and B, the public doesn't know. Now you got it. He said, you remember that, everything will be fine.
That's it. Well, this has been great, Michael. I really appreciate you jumping on. And May 11th, everybody go see his jazz group playing. They're doing a tribute to Cole Porter down at Winter's Jazz Club. And I know we will have you back on, and we're going to catch back up and get way into some more stuff, because you and I could have talked for like 5 hours about all.
Oh yeah, I got 40 years to talk about.
Exactly. All right. Thanks for being on, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
And of course, thanks everybody for watching. As I always say, all the information is at chicagojazz.com. And until next time, hopefully I will see someone out on the scene.